Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss my thoughts on the announcement that under pressure Chief of Staff for Keir Starmer, Sue Gray, has resigned and taken up another high profile job within government. But why exactly did she have to resign? But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So the media have been reporting on damaging briefings against Sue Gray for some time now, a few weeks. Inevitably, when the media reports on these things, they always describe the person at the centre of the row as under pressure. It was the same here. But I'll tell you something that was missing from any of the reporting, and that is how exactly Sue Gray was supposed to be not suitable for her role as Chief of Staff. You know, one of the big things we had are stories about some advisers being aggrieved that Gray was being paid more than the Prime Minister. This was an infantile complaint. The Prime Minister is actually underpaid, as are all ministers, come to it, MPs. Consider that, and I know you might look at it and you might think, well, hang on a minute, are you going to try and tell me that people like Boris Johnson and Jonathan Gullis were underpaid? It's like, no, but if you want a better quality of politician, you need to pay them more, right? Consider that Keir Starmer is paid just over £75,000 a year for being Prime Minister, on top of the £91,000 for being an MP, making a total of about £167,000. And consider that as well, by the way, you get paid less for being Prime Minister than an MP. When Neville Chamberlain was Prime Minister, he was paid today's equivalent about £800,000 a year. So you consider that the salaries of highly skilled executives and project managers that they can get elsewhere, for example. In actual fact, those doing the same jobs in government are actually paid a very uncompetitive salary. It's no wonder we have so much incompetence in government. We just don't pay enough. So the fact that Gray was getting slightly more than Starmer said more about how poorly we pay people at the top of politics rather than how well she was getting paid. In fact, the mainstream news editors who were making a big song and dance out of the row were all paid more than either Gray or Starmer, and in some cases paid more than both of them put together. Beyond that, there wasn't really that much else. This will become important later on, but there were arguments about where she was positioning certain people's offices within Downing Street. 10 Downing Street is not, many people who've sort of been there will say it's not a very suitable workplace. It's basically a converted house. It's a townhouse. It's not really all that suitable as a working hub. And that causes a lot of anxiety and lots of problems. But beyond that, there wasn't anything reported. Like, no one was able to say, oh, Sue Gray doesn't seem to be a very good Chief of Staff for this reason or that reason. You know, there were lots of leaks to the media, and there were suggestions that a lot of these leaks may have come from Simon Case, the outgoing Cabinet Secretary. There is animosity between Case and Gray. A few years ago, before Starmer hired Gray, you got the impression that Case, although senior to Gray, felt threatened by her. She was considered far more competent. She had a very good reputation within the civil service. Case had been brought in by Johnson specifically as an outsider to shake up the civil service. But Case, like most of Johnson's appointments, turned out to be deeply unsuitable for the role. His position became untenable during the COVID inquiry, which he has dodged quite a bit. And he's leaving. I mean, he should never have been Cabinet Secretary for this long in the first place. He's getting ready to leave the Cabinet Office with what used to be a good reputation, but it's now largely in tatters. The fate seemingly of everyone touched by Johnson. What I've not seen reported anywhere is anything about how Sue Gray is or was unsuitable in the role of Chief of Staff or struggling or whatever. Now, obviously, I'm not privy to what goes on behind closed doors. A great deal of what I'm saying here is going to have to be sort of speculation. Even journalists won't know everything. And if they do, you can't always trust them to tell the full truth. But I've seen absolutely nothing here other than the media flexing its muscles in order to get a gobby but competent woman sacked from a senior position. And unless there really is much more to this, I can only say I'm disappointed that this has happened. Gray resigned today, saying that the position had become a distraction. Now, I don't know to what extent Keir Starmer will have just accepted this resignation or whether he will have decided himself that it's the right thing to do. I don't know. I hope that he's just had to accept it and Gray has just chosen to resign, because otherwise this is just given into the mob. Not that I'm suggesting the mob and the media in this particular case. This is clearly internal. There were lots of reports about rows centering on Gray. There was no real meat on the bones. I suspect from the media's point of view, it was mostly boredom at the lack of real political intrigue with a more mature government in place. I mean, the top UK political story on the Guardian website on Friday afternoon was it was of a spoof blue plaque being erected outside the supermarket where the Daily Star bought the lettuce that outlasted Liz Truss. When that's your top political story, that is a sign that the government we've got now just isn't supplying political journalists with the scandals they've become accustomed to. So, of course, they're going to eagerly go with any hints of political cloak and dagger that they come across. So the real question is, who are the mob here? Who's actually sort of forced her out? Because I don't believe that Sue Gray had any good reason to resign as Chief of Staff. It was far too early anyway. I can't believe it would be related to Simon Case, at least not alone. He's going. Once he's gone in the new year, if he was the only instigator, things would have just naturally settled down. There must have been a feeling that this was a row that was going to keep dragging on and that someone had to go. That the position was going to become untenable. So better to deal with it now rather than risk it destabilising things later on when it's building more positive momentum. After all, anything Labour do now that looks bad, better to be done now where everything looks bad at the moment, which suggests that those with an axe to grind against Gray would be people who are expected to be sticking around 10 Downing Street for the long term. Morgan McSweeney has been announced as the new Chief of Staff, so he's got her job. Now, he was Starmer's head of political strategy. Now, in many ways, he knows his stuff. He's absolutely competent. He also has his detractors, though, not just from Corbyn supporters, really don't like him. But there's not too many of those in 10 Downing Street. But there were a few reports of tension between McSweeney and Gray as well, with Gray sort of saying, oh, no, you have to have your desk over there and you can't have access to this computer system and stuff like that. But we don't know. There's various reports saying, there are reports of tensions between the two, but also reports that there aren't. So we don't really know. But I would be very disappointed if it turns out that McSweeney has had any role in creating this row because he's benefited personally. It also potentially has the effect of reducing the breadth of voices in Starmer's ear. Now, that's never a good thing. It's been obvious that Starmer has not been getting the best political advice over the last few months, and he absolutely needs it. Keir Starmer does not have good political instincts. That's obvious, but it's like I said of Rishi Sunak when he became Prime Minister. I said he's not a good politician, but if he had decent advisors, my main criticism of Sunak, largely beyond the political criticisms, because at the end of the day he's a Tory, was the fact that he surrounded himself with yes men, which is a problem. Surrounded himself with people all of the same view or all pretending to have the same view, which means you don't have anyone telling you you're getting things wrong, which means you get things wrong. McSweeney has a track record of success. He's no mug, but his record is in campaign strategy. He's an absolute master. He's won multiple campaigns, but his record in advising government on political matters, let's look at the result of it. It has been to allow Starmer to get into a mess over the winter fuel payments policy. If they were going to implement it as they plan on implementing it, a good political strategy should have said, do not touch this with a barge pole. The other records are failing to properly manage the confected gifts and donations row in the media, completely misjudging the way to present their initial plans in government. That's resulted in polling hits that they didn't have to take. Although Starmer has good reason to trust McSweeney, you absolutely want to keep him close to you. You want to make him a big part of your future campaigns. I don't think he should have such faith in him that he decides to give him much more concentrated over political strategy in general. He's got his own blind spots. And this move effectively does that. It basically puts McSweeney, who already has the trust of Starmer, for good reasons, too close, as in being just like the main voice now, whispering in his ear. Because, someone will be replaced. McSweeney will be replaced as Starmer will get a new head of political strategy, sure. But that person will almost certainly not have the same clout with the Prime Minister, even if they're more worthy of it, which they may not be. So there's a real danger here that Starmer ends up creating a bit of an echo chamber, that groupthink that causes more missteps in the future. And as I say, politics is Starmer's weakness. He actually needs to surround himself with people who cover all those weaknesses. McSweeney is not an all-rounder. And he needs to strengthen his game here. And I don't think this move does that. As I say, my view of McSweeney is a great campaign strategist. He's not proven in media management. In fact, I think there are good reasons to doubt that his media management skills are just not there. And this is something Labour need desperately to strengthen. In the coming years, it won't be enough just to deliver policy. They may imagine, well, we'll just deliver policy. They're actually going to need the public to feel those improvements. And some people will, yes, they'll just feel them. You can't just sit back and hope that happens. You have to point things out as well. And that requires communication skills. My impression from today's news is that Starmer has not improved his team's overall communication skills. You know, he's changed staffing to lean more heavily on one person who is good at organising, not so good at communicating. But it's done now. We'll just have to see if it leads to noticeable improvements. If it does, then okay. There's plenty I don't know about this situation. Or does it actually make things worse or no better? If it leads to improvements, fair enough. I'm just not particularly hopeful, I should say. You know, I'm not here saying that I think Sue Gray was an awesome communicator. She may have been or she may not have been. I have no idea. But she was at least a different voice with a different perspective in the conversation. She's still going to work closely with Starmer, of course, but in a much narrower role now, which is disappointing. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.